Hey everyone, it's Ryan, and welcome back to Sketch for Switchers. Now, today we're going to be talking about styling. So that includes adding colors and fills and effects to all your shapes inside of a sketch document. So let's open up Sketch and get started. I'm going to hit just choose on a new document, and in my window, I'll hit A and make an artboard. Now, if you haven't already, there were two lessons before this one about the basics of creation and editing, and one about knowing your way around the sketch interface. So if you're not familiar with those things, you might want to go check out those other two lessons. But for now, I'm going to start by making a few objects here on my canvas. I'm going to make a rectangle or a square, and I just hit R on my keyboard to do that and hold down Shift to keep it square. So great, there's a square. I'm going to hit O, and that's what's going to get me my O for oval. Hold down Shift and keep it a circle. That's good. Let's hold down Shift, and there we go. Nice little smart guides. Center, center. Great. And now I don't really remember. Yeah, triangle does not have a keyboard shortcut. So I'm going to come down here into triangle, and I'm going to make a triangle in my little shape menu. Now, if you don't have that shape menu up in your toolbar, no worries. Go check out the little quick tip that involves customizing your menu shortcuts, or you can use the insert menu, insert shape, and then choose something from there. So it really doesn't matter which shapes you start off with. We're just going to use these to get started talking about some of our styles. So let's select one of the shapes. We'll start over here on the left. It's called a rectangle and an oval, but we know that they're really squares and circles. And over here on the right, we see appearance. And under here, we see style. This might be expanded for you. It could be collapsed. It was collapsed for me, so that must be where it was the last time I used Sketch. It remembers those kind of things. And see, we have on every object inside of Sketch fills and borders. Now, these work a lot like they would in Illustrator. You're probably used to, in Adobe, this palette being over on the left. Here we have fills, and I've got a bunch of colors, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I like to have a lot of colors to choose from. But here we can use our fill palette and choose both the saturation, lightness, and darkness. We can choose the hue from this little hue strip down here. Maybe I want a nice little blue. I love that sort of Hawaiian blue look. And of course, we can type in a hex in this box. We can use exact RGB values and alpha values, 0 to 100. Now, why RGBA? Well, this is what maps directly to CSS and HTML as a pretty standard way of talking about color, at least in November of 2018. There are definitely other ways to declare color in code, but this is how Sketch prefers to do it. You'll also see here this sort of opacity strip, and it's hard to tell that this is see-through, so I'm going to just bring my circle over and use my keyboard shortcut of Option, Command, and Control, and hit down. Send that to back. So there we see the alpha and see-through. And you can see, like, right here in my fills, there's a little bit of a checkerboard that tells me that it is semi-see-through all the way to all the way. So those are your basic options, and you have a palette of colors to choose from down here. Well, let's say you find a color that you really like. I'm going to make that Hawaiian blue again. Really saturated, really nice. Well, that doesn't exist here. So I'm going to hit this little plus button, and that's going to add this color to my global colors. That means anytime I create a new sketch document, and I'll hit Command N, just so we can see here, this is a second sketch window. I'm going to make an object. Now down at the bottom of the list is one of my global colors. So if you have a design system you're using, or you have a project you're working on and you know there's a set of colors you're always going to be returning to, this is a great way to ensure that you're going to have those colors available to you in any sketch document you create. Now, very much true to the Mac, this is also a drag and drop palette. you can take this Hawaiian blue and I can drag it, whoop, there we go, all the way up to be the first color. I think I can even drag it off. There you go. And it makes a little trash sound when it comes off. So if you want to get rid of a color, that's an easy way to do it. But keep in mind, there's not really any preset way of getting all the default sketch colors back without using some sort of plugin or extension, which is stuff we will talk about a little bit later in a later lesson. So be careful what you do with your color palette. Try and keep it in relative consistency. So I'm going to close this for now. Now the next thing I'm going to talk to you about, that was global colors. We have document colors as well. So maybe you just have one file where you're working with a particular palette of colors. You need that for that file or those series of pages, but you're not really planning on using them in any other context. And you can see my Hawaiian blue is gone from here. Well, I'm going to make the Hawaiian blue a document color. So that means anytime I go to style anything else in the document, I can scroll down and choose my document color. That's great, but I'm going to hit that Command N again. I'm going to make a new oval, and you can see no color there. So document colors, global colors. It makes a lot of sense when you think about it, but it is a little bit different from what you might be used to in Photoshop or Illustrator. Now you can do more than just fill a color with a solid. Up here, we have the option to toggle between what types of fill we want. So here is a solid color. That's always the default. Second is our gradient. So you can see what it tries to do is generate a gradient based off the color that you already have. So it takes it and mathematically creates a lighter, more saturated version. So maybe I want to actually go a little bit lighter. Or maybe I even want to go a different color. So there we go. There's a gradient, and likewise, global and document gradients are there. The gradient editor is pretty easy. All you can do here is drag these left and right. If you want, you can grab those handles right on your object and position those how you like. And if you want to add more colors, just click somewhere in the band and you can create additional colors for yourself. So there we go, a third color, and I can adjust its handle accordingly. Also, you can use this rotate here, and that's a quick way of changing the gradient's direction if you weren't happy with it initially. Now, I'm going to go ahead and choose radial gradient. Radial gradient works much like you'd expect. We have a circle here, but we also get this additional handle on the outside of our object, which can make our gradient a little bit more ovular or more oval-like. And if I choose the innermost, you can see it changes the exact spot of the gradient. So maybe I'm making a sphere, and I bring it out a little bit, and it would be a little bit more round. There we go. A very funky colored / lit sphere, but a sphere nonetheless. And with any of these colors, you can always make them semi-transparent and see-through and layer them on top of each other. Next is our angle gradient. You might be familiar with this. The controls here work pretty similar. You can just grab one and it'll rotate it in a circle. So you can kind of adjust your palette like this. You can even take your yellow or your blue and space those out. And as you notice, I'm spacing these out. It's going to space them out on the right-hand side under our angular gradient menu. Now I've got a little bit of the Mac beach ball, which is nice. I think I might be missing a color or two there. The next fill is a photo fill. I prefer photo fills to masks quite a bit. A photo fill essentially gives you this terrible black and white picture to start, but you can choose an image, and let's see if I have anything good in my downloads. Not really. But here's a picture of a keyboard. I'll hit open. And you can see an image goes right in the middle there. Now, they give you a couple of little images to start, and they might look really bad. You're like, wow, Ryan, that does not look good. Well, that's because it's in fill mode. So instead of fill mode, I'm going to go tile, and you'll notice it looks a lot better. These are patterns built for specific sizes, and I can click in here and use my arrow keys to go up and down, or I can drag the handle to get a size that I want. This is a good, quick way of adding stripes and texture to what you have. So let's say I'm interested in having lines, but my object is see-through. Here, I'll put this behind. Well, if I'm going to layer the lines or this pattern on top of another color, what should I do? Okay, well, there's an option there. But before we talk about it, I want to show you a couple other options here. I'm going to go back to that picture of a keyboard. Stretch is squashing the image to fit the aspect ratio. So if I unlock this shape and start to stretch it, you see the image stretches with it. Instead, fit tries its best to keep the edges of the photograph in frame, but you can see a little strange looking if you're looking for the full crop. Fill is probably going to be your best bet, and yeah, if you drag in your own files, you can absolutely tile them. It looks pretty crazy. I don't know if I would do that, but it's up to you. So I'm going to try something very simple. I'm going to take this photograph, and I'm going to add a couple things to it. First, I want to put some text over it. So I'm going to need it to be a little darker. It's a little too bright right now. So I'm going to come up here and add a new fill. So this creates another color layer on top. And it starts as a gradient by default, but I can make it a color. And you can see, if I make it a little bit more see-through and black, now we have a tint over our whole image. Well, maybe you say, well, in Photoshop, when I tint an image, I don't just quite use the image itself. Maybe I choose a gray, and I don't just do a flat color. I have a blending mode. Well, that's great. There's a way to do that. See right here on the tip of the swatch here that is fill, well, that is your blending mode. You can change it to multiply, and now you have a lot richer of a tint happening. That's how you can get very good colors. Look at that blue, and multiply. Color burn, very striking. Screen, color dodge. So most of the ones that you would have available in Photoshop, and these extra ones that are mostly used for iOS or Android development. So iOS has plus lighter and plus darker as blending modes, which pull in a little extra oomph, a little extra saturation / boldness to it. These are just as easy to toggle off. You can create a bunch if you really want. So here I'm going to do a gradient, pick one of the pre-mades. I'm going to change it to screen, and I'm going to adjust its opacity down. And here I'm going to do a radial gradient. I'm going to bring it in the center. I'm going to pull this handle in, and it'll create something of a vignette. But you could just keep stacking these things. Here I'll do the image. We'll bring our lines, put it into tile. This is going to give us a very sort of microwave window effect. And then I will take these, I'll put them into multiply mode, and then I'll bring the opacity way, way down so you can just barely see it. So here's one object. It's got a ton of fills on it. And now I'm going to hit T and just type something is fine. So now I can read that on top of the image. This is probably overkill. I don't see you needing this every day, but if you want to do some of the more Illustrator-like effects, or you're doing very skeuomorphic icons, or a really detailed vector design, Sketch will let you layer these effects onto the same object, and you can see it's just one object on the canvas. Now, you bet, Borders has all of the same stuff. I'm going to toggle on a border, and I'm going to use the width here and turn it up so you can see. But borders, you can stack, you can fill with all the different gradients. You can't fill them with images, so that's something to be mindful of. But you can fill them with all of that, and you have different options like inside, center, outside. These are things you're probably already familiar with. If you have different points, I'll draw a line here, and I did that by hitting L. I'll thicken this up so you can see. So for tips, we can do our standard end shape, curtail it exactly where the vectors are. You can see my two little white squares here is where the vector ends. You can do rounded, and likewise, if I take this on my triangle, I'm going to turn this on. I'm going to thicken this up. I'm going to change to center. And then I'm going to change the joint. You can do these sort of, I think it's metered or mitered. Not sure what that, but it is kind of a tapered joint. I rarely use these, but a rounded joint I use quite a bit. And of course, you could do 1, you can do 2. And by the way, if you stack borders, you get another set here of options. So this border can be inside. You don't have to have it all apply to the same thing. You could continue to use the same width, but this is a cool way of getting additional border shapes as well. So let's say I'm going to get rid of this and this for now because we've explored borders. And I'm going to turn this off. And look, if you have no borders, you're not using it, maybe you don't even want the option here because it's a bunch of stuff. I'm going to hit this trash can, and the border option simply collapses. It's not there anymore. Well, the last thing we're going to learn about styling is the appearance palette. And that is up here. You've probably noticed it. It's ominously saying no layer style, even though we have a lot of layer styles going on. Appearance is a way to reuse the exact same effect on multiple objects inside your document. So in the appearance palette, I'm going to select it and then create a new layer style. Now you can see before I touch anything else, it's highlighting text. It is guessing what I want to name the style based off of the layer name. The layer is named oval. The appearance name is oval style. Well, why don't I call it keyboard in blue? That's probably too long of a name. It's not exactly what you'd expect to have happen, but keyboard in blue is very specific, and we only have one style in this document. Now, it doesn't matter if I insert a triangle. It doesn't matter if I insert a star or a polygon or whatever shape I'm using. When I select them, you can see no layer style. Now, keyboard in blue is an option, and I can change each of these to be keyboard in blue. Now, let's say I want that to change. Well, here's an additional thing to know about the appearances. Let's say I've decided the lines were too much. I don't want this crazy line anymore. I'm going to uncheck it. Another way to do this is say I don't want the gradient anymore. I'm going to take this gradient and I'm just going to pull it off. See how little it becomes? Boom, in the trash. Lines. Boom, in the trash. How about this? I'm going to change it to angular. Very striking indeed. And now I'm going to change it to a different blue. Well, all of these changes have only happened to this object, and the appearance palette shows my keyboard in blue style in italics with an asterisk. Okay, what does that mean, Ryan? Well, it's pretty simple. That just means this object has changed from the original keyboard in blue style. Now when I click on this dropdown, I have 3 options. I can either make this a completely new style and maybe call it keyboard in navy or something like that. Or I can reset the layer style. Reset means put it back to keyboard in blue. I liked keyboard in blue. I don't know how this became different. I want that. An update says, no, this is actually the new keyboard in blue style. So let's go through them just so we can see what they do. First, I'm going to create a new layer style and call this not keyboard in blue 2, but keyboard in navy. Okay, well now when I select another object, I can also change it to keyboard in navy. Those things are fine. Now I'm going to hit Command Z and undo that. So I'm going to choose Reset Layer Style. Resetting the layer style is going to say, wipe away my changes. I want it to be keyboard in blue. I hit Reset. You notice keyboard in blue is no longer italics, no longer an asterisk. Now I'm going to hit Command Z and go back to that. Finally, I'm going to say Update Layer Style. When I say Update Layer Style, it's going to say this is now the new quote-unquote canonical keyboard in blue. So anything that's keyboard in blue should look like this now. It's a little bit like updating a smart object in Photoshop or Illustrator. So I'm going to say Update Layer Style. Now, anything that claimed to be keyboard in blue shares that exact style. So you can see how the appearance palette, fills, strokes, all of this stuff is going to be very powerful when you're trying to think of an entire set of screens for an app or a website and you want one particular style and make it consistent. And when your client or your boss or someone on your team says, or maybe even just you say, God forbid it comes from you, say, you know what? I don't really like that style that I had made anymore. I think we're not going to do images. I think it's just going to be simple colors. You can just uncheck these. Maybe I want to test it back later. I'll uncheck. That looks right. Update the layer style. There we go. We're flat colors all the way across the board. And that's a really easy, powerful way to manage styles and colors inside of Sketch, and a little bit different from how you might be used to it in Adobe, Photoshop, or Illustrator. Now, we typed a little bit here, but in the next lesson, we're going to be talking about text, and there's going to be a tip and trick in between those two lessons that is all about that appearance palette and some of the cool things you can do with it. Until then, I'll see you in the next lesson.